So, welcome everybody. We are so proud and so pleased during this exhibit, Righting a Wrong, Japanese Americans and World War II, to have Kiyo Sato, a local legend here in Rancho Cordova. Most of you and many of you know her through either the VFW, the JACL, her book. Many of you have probably read her book. This is the hard copy of her book. The first edition was released as Dandelion Through the Crack. This particular book we're going to have Kiyo sign, and it's going into the Rancho Cordova City Hall case so that we can have it for posterity, for history. Because she is forever and will always be a part of our history. I asked a question in the beginning, how many of you knew that if you've read the book, the grocery store, the Mills grocery store that referenced several times, is the very building we are sitting in today. Kiyo, I met 5 years ago when I had a Holocaust exhibit, and I asked her, she came in and she graciously gave me her book, and I gotta tell you, I don't like to read. I'm an artist, I like pictures. But I was fascinated by her story, and I asked her if she would speak, and we had a great session. And back then, she would travel and do a lot of things in schools and book clubs. I wanted this to be a little bit easier on her, a nice little chat that we can have together. So let's get started. So Kiyo, your folks, your father was told to leave Japan and not come back. And that was 1911, the very year this building was built. Why was he told that by his parents?
Well, the family was having a difficult, can you hear me okay with this? Was having a difficult time, and the father had gambled so much of the money away, so the mother was there with five children, and Shinji, my father, was the youngest. So they decided that the father would take the youngster, 14 years old, and go to America and earn some money. Well, so the mother said, Shinji, don't come back here. She knew that any place else on earth would be better than his being there. So, and it's so much like what's happening now, isn't it? You know? So,
Yeah.
Yes.
So they came here and they came to San Francisco, is that right?
Through there, and then went to the Napa Valley, and worked as the father. His father worked as a foreman on this orchard, McClintock Orchard, and he at 14 worked as an adult in the orchard. And then he was such a curious young man. He'd pick up anything that was written in English, labels, pieces of newspaper, pieces of whatever, and stick it in his pocket. And then when he got to his room, he would study these pieces. And so, anyway, I've been totally amazed at how he survived and did so well. Then he decided he wanted to stay in America. After being able to read about our founding fathers and all these great minds. In fact, I even found an old book of his essays of Francis Bacon. I don't know when he had time to read all this. But anyway,
He certainly was very curious, and there was a time that you write in the book where his family wanted him to get married, and they wanted to do a traditional set up and arranged marriage for him, and he was very much against that. He wanted to marry for love. Tell us how he met your mother.
You know, he was 14 when he came in here, and he knew he had learned what it was like to be in America. And he decided this is where he was going to stay. Anyway, when he was of marriageable age, there was this baishakunin. Anybody familiar with baishakunin, the marriage arranger, you know, that made arrangements with this young woman, whoever she was, that he would go to Japan and get married. Well, the thing was, see, we had this Oriental Exclusion Act that was going to go in 1924. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so he was rushed into it. They told him to go to Japan and meet this lady and get married. Well, that didn't settle with my father. And so he went to Japan and stayed in this ryokan, what they call ryokan, board and room and whatever. And then he watched this young lady who came in and out, sat in the corner and ate, and then off she went in her nursing uniform. And so he was very impressed with her, and I don't blame him now that she's my she's my wonderful mother. But anyway, so he decided he's going to have some friends sort of act like, to make it proper, act like spy shakunin, and arrange this together. And so he did. And I'm so glad.
He truly was an amazing man with his own mind and his own heart, and wanted to go his own way. And you talk about him picking up pieces of paper and reading, and he really was a student of life, wasn't he?
He was a curious young man.
Very curious. Yes. I think that went down the seedlings pretty far. So your mom is married to Momi Sato, and she was a nurse, and so you guys they came to Sacramento in 1928, 29, was that right?
I don't know that exact date.
Okay.
You know better than I do.
So
many of you probably know better than I do.
At that time, it wasn't allowed for Japanese Americans to buy land. So how did they buy their farm, which is literally 3.5 miles, or was 3.5 miles down the road, which is why this grocery store was the place to hang out, and quite frankly still is.
Yes.
So how did they have to buy their farm?
In his case, they had the seller of the 80 acres was Mr. Cyrus. Oh dear, he was an attorney.
Very good.
Do you know that?
Yeah.
And so, By the way, can I sort of sidetrack? Because I don't think they know how old I am.
How young are you?
39.
If you're Jack
So
Benny, it's 39.
If I hesitate or I ask somebody to answer, because I will be 100 in 2 months.
Yes, May 8th, everybody light a candle.
Yeah. Thank
Not
you.
many people get the honor to turn that age.
Now to get back on track.
Yes.
My daughter is always telling me, Mom, you should sort of.
So they had to have co-signers.
Yes, no, well, the attorney took care of everything, and it was called the Northern California Development Company.
So they paid that company, so it was under their name.
You're right. Well, I don't know the details. Maybe lawyer Kaizuka, who's there someplace, might be able to. Yeah.
So you were the firstborn, and another very prominent historical site here in Rancho is the Edward Kelly School, which you attended. Tell us a little bit about going to school at the Edward Kelly and Miss Cox, your teacher.
You know, we were so fortunate that we had at that time, we had a safe place on our 20-acre farm. And then we had Edward Kelly School from first grade until eighth grade. Can you imagine, you know, a safe place? In those days, the prejudice was terrible, but we knew that those two places would be fine for us. Miss Cox was an amazing teacher. Anybody familiar with Miss Cox? Colleen Zoller isn't here, is she? She's writing a book.
I met her.
Oh.
She came into the gallery, and I can't wait to read the story.
Yes. She, when I was in second grade, she had 52 children by herself. My best education, formal education, was from first grade to eighth grade with Miss Cox.
And you
Yeah.
were valedictorian.
Oh. No.
I don't think everybody knows that.
Well.
And you had to give your first speech.
I know. And Miss Cox was so good about it, you know. Write down what you're thinking. And then she even gave me a little red notebook, and said, write in it whatever you think of. I guess that's where my ability to write came from. And so anyway, Miss Cox was truly an amazing teacher. And Edward Kelly School was an amazing place. It had acreage, it had we even had baseball diamond in the back. And we had that space, and our education, I think, was so well-rounded, and
Now, Colleen, is that her name?
Colleen.
Colleen.
That's Colleen.
She told me that Miss Cox actually came down to the station to wave you guys off the day that you went to the train station.
Yes. You know, and let me get a little bit further here. We were corralled into this filthy train. You can't hardly see through the windows over there by Washington School. And I thought to myself, until the very last minute, somebody will come running and say, this is wrong, this was a mistake. But nobody came. I mean, you know, there were hundreds of guards over there by the railroad tracks with their bayonets.
And you were just turned 19, correct?
Just turned 19. And I thought, until the very last minute, I thought, somebody's gonna come and say, let's stop this. But nobody came. Nobody. And when that train started to move, I just collapsed. I just cried. I cried. I couldn't stop crying. This was the end of things, I thought, you know? And my college, first year of college, I would have finished in one more month. So there we were. And then there was, as the train went by, hands waving. And there was Miss Cox and Mrs. Fairwell, who was my piano teacher, and 13 children. I wish I wish Violet Cabral could be here. She was one of them. She's still living. She was one of the children, and she tells me, "Oh, that was so wrong," she said, every time we see each other. But anyway, there they were. And when we came back 4 years later, Miss Cox wasn't there.
Colleen said she had gotten fired because she took kids down to wave off Kiyo's family and all the others because they were considered, what's the word I'm looking for?
We were considered spies
Yeah,
or
so,
saboteurs.
back then it was called, they were Jap lovers, and that was a horrible sin. And so any Caucasian person who sided or had friends with Japanese Americans were then looked upon very poorly indeed. A part of the book that really struck me the most, I was a person who never wanted to go to college. I just wanted to go out and work. But when I was reading, so the day that the bomb was dropped, December 7th, it was a Sunday. You were on the farm. You had no idea. You were living the farm life. You went to church. You had your family meal. You were playing. You might have even come down to the grocery store. But the next day, you got up, you got in that 32 Studebaker of yours, and you drove to school like it was any other day. But it wasn't any other day, was it?
I walked down the hallway of the city college. It used to be junior college. And nobody was talking to me. And my friends who would, in the morning say hi in the hallway, they just pretend they didn't see me. And I had a terrible feeling, something was strange. And I was glad to get into my classroom, sat there. There was this gal who always asked me for my homework paper. That didn't happen.
That would have been me.
And so, when the bell rang, I met my other Japanese American classmates, and they were so surprised. They said, "You didn't know?" And so that's how I found out what had happened.
Could you imagine? Everything's fine, everything's hunky-dory. You're just going through life, and all of a sudden, and hearing, that everybody around you thinks you're an enemy, a spy, a horrible person, and how that, in this safe space we call school, how that must have felt. I put myself there in your shoes as I read that, and I started crying because it was so touching, and I felt nauseous, which I'm sure you felt at the time. And if you read the book and you read the gripping tale of white knuckling it back home that day after learning this, most of us will never know terror of that nature. But then it got worse.
Yes, it got worse and worse. And you know, it got so that I felt like the whole country was enveloped in this fog of hatred.
Right.
You know, sorry,
So-
I forgot about my.
When
That's what happens when you get old.
when did you notice, so that was the day after the bombing and you came home, when did the posters start going up? When did these posters start going up?
That, oh gee, I don't remember any of you. By the way, I got to know this. How many of you were in one of those camps? 1, 2, just the two of us?
2, 3, 4,
Oh,
4 people?
wonderful. You're gonna have to help me.
I think it was in the spring that they started going up. But imagine driving down a street and all of a sudden posters on fence posts are going up saying, "You have to leave."
That I will not forget. When I first saw those posters, I didn't want to stop and read them. I had to go down the swale and then hold on to the fence post and read the fine print. No, I wasn't going to do that. And then I drove on, and here was another. And this was all on this 1 mile
Stretch.
routier road. You know routier road, all of you? 1 mile routier road, and there must have been about 5 or 6 of these posters plastered. And I thought to myself, why didn't they just, there were only 4 farms, Japanese farms, and why didn't they just send us a letter? No.
It was all about making a statement. The other thing about it is, you know, the exhibit is laid downstairs, is labeled "Righting a Wrong." We've done many things in history. We're pretty fortunate in California where we do learn a few things in school still. I grew up in Idaho. We didn't learn anything about this. I didn't even know there was a concentration camp or internment camp. But back then they called them relocation centers. Like, we're gonna happily relocate you somewhere. And then they called them apartments, not barracks. So we changed the verbiage and the vernacular to suit what is good for the press and the media that doesn't make us look so bad. But that's not really the case.
I was called a non-alien.
A non-alien.
Non-alien. Well, so that was to avoid the fact that citizens, American citizens, should not be incarcerated. Imagine changing all this verbiage. And then they were,
Because you were a citizen.
right, of course.
You
yes.
were born here in Sacramento.
Exactly. And so, anyway, where was I going with this? See what happens? Somebody help me.
That's
But
okay.
anyway,
So they called you a non-alien.
right, now, we were sent to first to the temporary holding camps.
And where was yours?
That was in Pinedale, California, where there were room for 5,000 inmates. And some of them were horse stalls. Can you imagine our fellow human being putting whole families into horse stalls? They had a miserable, miserable time. Manure, the smell was awful, and there was muddy outside, and they had to find pieces of lumber so that they couldn't get into the stalls. Imagine, who thought of that? But we were in Pinedale Assembly, so 15 of them, waiting for the permanent camps to be finished. And mine was in the Arizona desert. And how did they ever find 10 of the most miserable places on earth? We drove, in my case, we drove 70 miles into the desert. Sagebrush and sand, that's all. And then there's a sign that says Poston, I think it's a Poston Indian Reservation. I found out later that we were inside a 400,000 acre Indian reservation. Colorado River Indian tribes were there. And I thought to myself, how did they ever survive? First I thought, goody, we are going to a place, we've been invited to a place where we would hunt and fish and not do much. That's what we learned in high school history class. Imagine. So, anyway, that's there were 10 of the permanent camps from here to Arkansas, and there were 2 in Arkansas in the swamplands. There was one in Idaho and Wyoming and different places, all desolate, very desolate places. Now, I want to tell you that they decided that these places were going they were to be called welcome centers. Imagine, yes. And so anyway, so now we know where these were concentration camps.
Yes, and I've lived in Arizona. I lived there for 5 years. And these barracks were thin wood, no insulation, wooden floors, just wooden barracks with black tarp, which, who thought of that idea, because that soaks in the sun. If any of you have ever been to Arizona in the summertime, it gets to be 128, and outside the wind is blowing, and it makes you feel like you're inside a convection oven because you feel like Thanksgiving turkey. You're just being cooked. The air is so hot that it hurts your lungs. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. That doesn't even touch the rattlesnakes and the scorpions, which I'd rather have the heat than the bugs. But it was a horrible, horrible place.
Yes, we drove for 70 miles into the desert. It was 127 degrees that day, and we're standing squeezed in like sardines in this back of the army truck. And I thought, oh, I was beginning to lose it, you know? And I thought, if only I could sit down. Well, you couldn't sit down, you were squished in. And finally, when those black tar paper shacks came into view, I just couldn't hold it any longer, and I slumped. And I remember somebody catching me by the elbow. And it was 3 hours later that I woke up, and I thought, I saw this gray cement on top of me, and I thought, I must have died. You know, strange feeling, you know? And then I looked around, and here were all these cots laid out in this laundry room, and this was the bottom of the laundry tub, the cement, you know.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And I thought to myself, I've never been able to find out, but I thought, I was glad to wake up. And I thought, how many of these people didn't wake up? That's a number you need to find out for me. But you know, so the recorded high that year I read was 145. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yes, very.
So, most people, many people I should say, spent 3 to 3.5 years in these camps. What was camp like after you sort of realized? Now, your dad, he was an amazing man. He was smart, ingenious. He tucked away nails, seeds, a jug, a little saw, one of those fold-up little hand saws. I actually have my mom's just like that, for pruning trees, into the bedrolls of all of the kids. And remember, you could only take what you could carry. But there were 9 of you in
No, 8 of us. My brother was in the service, in the army.
He'd already enlisted.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that is Sanji?
That was Seiji, the Seiji Steve.
I don't know their American names.
Sato.
So he was in the 442nd.
Right.
Okay. So in camp, your dad did some amazing things, and he became, because he knew English, because he was studious, he became much of the manager and foreman of your block, where he talked with much of the time the Caucasian guards and operated as a translator. Is that correct?
Well, he was bilingual, and so the director of the camp always would call him to interpret. And he was also the councilman advisor. And not being a citizen, he could not become a councilman. Can you imagine? Imagine. Here we are, all prisoners there, and having that kind of rule. But anyway, so my father did many things. He taught English in camp, and Mrs. Deguchi, when we came out of camp, Mrs. Deguchi, her neighbor who lived to be 101, she said, it's because of your father that I was able to go to the DMV and get my license. You know? So he did all kinds of things.
There were probably many people that were helped by him
Yes,
in camp.
yes.
Probably more than we even know,
Mm-hmm.
that even mentioned. Now, you were not in camp that long
No.
compared to, you were the first, well, other than your brother who was fighting in the 442nd, which, by the way, is the most decorated Purple Heart combat unit still today. That is impressive. And much like the Tuskegee Airmen, they were segregated, and they did so to prove to the United States that we're here, we want to be here, we'll fight for you, yet this is how you treat us. So how did you get out of camp so early on?
Well, my father was involved. I told you about with the director and the camp doings. He got this word that students will be soon released to go to school. So he said, why don't you apply? And so, it's not as easy as I make it sound, but I want to, I want to tell you that I was thoroughly investigated. And the reason why I found this out was because I was asked to speak or be on the panel at the Smithsonian. And so my daughter and I went down there and then got a message from the archives saying, will you stop by? So they put us into this. Now, if I don't get it straight, Chia, you keep me on track. They put us in this cubicle, glass thin cubicle, gave us white gloves.
Clean room is what they call it.
Oh, that's what they call it, all right. And Mr. David Haverstadt brought in this tray, impressive looking tray, and set in front of us. Lo and behold, my letters were there. My brother's letters were there. My cousin's letter was there. A few others. And I said, how did this all get here? Well, and so we were told that Mr. Lamboli had confiscated, well, I don't know if that word is good, confiscated 60 letters from letters written by Edward Kelly School students to Poston. And she had all these letters, and so Gerald Lamboli was able to take them. And when his job, he was a military intelligence officer assigned to my case. Can you imagine? And so he had come all the way down here to Edward Kelly School there on Rancho Road and questioned Ms. Cox. So I said, I would like to talk to Mr. Lamboli. And lo and behold, when I got home, here was his call from Dr. Cheryl Lamboli. And he told me about going to the opera and going to the Smithsonian lectures. And he's 94 years old. I knew he was old. 94 and doing all these things. And then he said, you people lived under those horrendous conditions. Somebody should write about it. And I said, I guess you haven't read my book. So I sent him a copy with a notation that I thanked him. And so I'm sorry to tell you that I haven't heard from him, but I'm sure he is gone, was gone. Anyway, isn't that interesting?
So,
Imagine.
so from camp, and you're still 19, you left what now has become a pretty safe environment because you have community, people are speaking the language, you've figured out how to adapt, if you will, with great resilience to camp life. And now you've been granted this permission to go to school, but now you're out on your own in a world where we're at war. Japanese are thought of as spies, killers, all these horrible things, even though you're an American. And you had to travel from Poston, Arizona to Michigan by yourself.
Not really, there were several others on the train.
Well, there was, yes, but you didn't have family with you.
No, oh no.
This was,
Mm-hmm.
you were on your own.
Mm-hmm. Well, the mothers were worried about me. They said, "You're going to get killed out there," and these mothers, none of us had money, but they gave me envelopes of money, and my father said, "Don't thank them, return that money. This is the money that, they had saved and they didn't have, like us, we didn't have any money." So he said, "I will accept a couple for you, because I know they want to and they can afford to, but the others just return them." So anyway, it was quite a journey going from Arizona, and thank goodness in Chicago, one of the parents of a missionary, took me in for one night. And then off I went. But what happened on that lonely trip through Indiana and through Michigan is that we had a stop in Elkhart, Indiana. Did I write about that? Yeah. Elkhart.
You did, but I'm trying to think about what that
Elkhart,
meant.
Indiana. And this young man, he must have been about maybe 16, high school. We called them at that time red caps. Are any of you know about red caps? They are dressed in red and they take care of the passengers or whatever need. And so this young man came up to me and I said, "No, I don't need your service." But he followed me and he said, "Where did you come from?" And surprisingly, I told him, I said, "I came from Poston, Arizona." And he was so curious. He said, "Let me buy you a cup of coffee." And so,
Did he know what Poston was?
no. We talked about it. Yes, exactly. And where's that? And what did you do there? And how come you were there? I mean, all these questions came, and I answered every one of them very honestly. And that was the beginning of my speaking. It felt good to tell about it, and somebody heard me. And so when I enrolled in college, it was so many speaking engagements, this church, that church, Detroit, Kalamazoo, all those places I was sent to. And,
Because you were willing to talk about it.
I was, thanks to the red cap.
Yeah.
That young man. In fact, I wrote a letter to the Elkhart Truth to thank that young man. But it just, I haven't heard. But Anyway, he started me on a new career, maybe, you know, and I haven't stopped talking since.
And thankfully so, because, you know, there are many people in many situations that go through very tough times, tragic times, very difficult stories who they don't want to remember them, they don't want to talk about them, they want to move on. But it's a history that we need to know about. It's a history that we need to teach people about, because we need not to repeat it. And the only reason that things get repeated is if we don't have people that understand the truth about them and the consequences that happen because of that. So we all thank that young man who was in the red cap for putting you on your journey of speaking the truth about your time.
And it's been interesting. I also organized the Speakers Bureau with our VFW post, the Nisei post. That's another history. And we've been going to hundreds of schools, you know, everywhere. And as far as Parker, Arizona,
Wow.
even, you know, they've asked us a couple of times to speak. And what is interesting is their questions. They'll always leave 10 minutes for questions. And one student said, "How come you guys managed not to get killed?" Imagine, a student. And they said, "Why didn't you hire a lawyer? Why didn't you protest? You know, why didn't you do this or that?" And what is so amazing is what our parents taught us, kodomo no tameni. Anybody understand? Yes, for the sake of children. For the sake of children. See, we do this. For the sake of children, we don't create more problems. For the sake of children, we go and accept what's happening that we can't change. But when there's a little crack someplace where we could make a difference, we do that. Kodomo no tameni will be the subtitle of my book. The title will be Dandelion Puff.
Oh, I love it. There's a little foreshadowing. It's almost finished, by the way.
Hopefully.
Yep.
That deadline is right here.
Did you have experiences when you were going to nursing school and in the Midwest where you were outwardly exposed to racism and people in your face calling you names?
No, but I was rejected whatever. I was rejected by the Navy because I was the wrong color. I was rejected by Yale School of Nursing. I was rejected by Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, and they all required a bachelor's degree to get in. They said, "We cannot accept anyone of your and black background." But eventually, when my brother was in the 442nd fighting in Europe, after a couple of years, I wrote to them again, all of them, 3 of them, and said, "My brother and all the other young men are fighting to uphold democratic principles. I cannot understand why you have this. ruling. And so lo and behold, they all sent me application forms. Imagine, and I got into one of them.
And then you went off and you joined the Army.
Air Force.
Air Force, I mean. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Air
I was
Force.
thinking 442nd,
Yeah,
100th. But you joined the Air Force as a nurse.
exactly. Exactly. Uh-huh.
And you had an opportunity, in your 2 years that you served, you had an opportunity to advance. They wanted to sign you again because they liked you and they would promote you,
Mhm.
but you didn't. Why?
I didn't quite go with the caste system in the military. My 5 brothers were all enlisted men, and I was an officer, and we weren't supposed to, whatever, fraternize, they call it. And I didn't quite go for that. They said, you stay in, somebody said, you stay in and you'll be the chief nurse. I said, well, thanks. But so I left the service. Another interesting experience is these guys who fought with the 442nd came back heroes, and the VFW would not take them.
What?
So I'm part of the VFW Nisei. Nisei meaning second generation Japanese. Nisei post 89, 85. We organized in 1947. And so anyway, we at that time, so the Niseis went on and we had 14 Nisei posts in California. Now we're down to 6 or something like that. And
Wow.
ours was the first one.
Wow, the one in Sacramento.
That's another experience, being a woman, I tell you.
You
that
were
was-
the only woman, is that correct?
Yeah.
At that post?
At that time. I think there's another Caucasian person who's on the roll, but I don't see her. But I was the first, and you know what it's like to be the only female in a whole room of guys? I tell you, in those days.
Yeah,
In those
still
days.
is.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But they were so good to me. Brought me bought my hat and all that, and went out to speak with me, and it was a good experience. One of the guys I sat with nudged me one time and said, when your name came up for membership, I told myself, what's VFW coming to? And he said, you've been good for us. So,
You gave him a good name.
hmm.
Your family got out of Poston and they went to Colorado to farm sugar beets. And so it was your entire family. You were in the Midwest in Indiana, and it was your second, the second oldest, the oldest boy, who was going to high school. Is that correct? Or was it be the third oldest that was going to high school and gave you money to come back to Colorado to join your family
Yes.
where you farmed.
My brother Don wanted to go to Michigan State.
What was his Japanese name? Kozo?
Sanji. And so my mother said, if you're gonna leave, you go to Hillsdale, Michigan. So he came, and my goodness, he high school, and he worked at a nursery there, and he also on weekends he worked for Dr. Martin doing housework, and he got all kinds of jobs. And one day he said, you know, you haven't seen the family for, what was it, years. And he hands me this money. And I said, Sanji, I said, you earn that money. You go home. He said, no. He said, you go home. And so that's how I got to the sugar beet farm in Colorado, where the family stayed in this little workers' cabin. And it's amazing how my mother fit everybody there in. And my father cut down trees, to a tree, and made the bunk beds for all of us. Amazing. Another amazing thing, going back to Poston, you know, the heat was so terrible. My father had rolled up a big old canvas, looking like a bedroll, you know, and just in case we had to put up shelter someplace. Imagine, you know. So what he did with that canvas was he had his hammer and nails. Everybody wanted to borrow his nails and hammer and whatever, and he hung that canvas from the rafters in the barracks and handed the bucket to one of the boys, and they'd go and splash water on this. I mean, you know, that was our air conditioner.
The first swamp cooler.
Yes, it was pretty. Kids would come in and lean against that, and then go out and play some more. You know, in and out. All these kids were coming in and out.
He was ingenious.
Oh, he was. I mean, amazing, really. He was. Both of my parents were something else. I guess that's why I'm sitting here talking to you. Probably.
Well, and but being the eldest, being female, you took on a lot of challenges and a lot of responsibility for the family.
Mm-hmm.
You were the first one to leave Colorado to come home
Mm-hmm.
to Sacramento by yourself.
Well, it was.
So you came back, you're free, and you get to this train station, and now what? So you call up the grocery store, the guys that know you, that you've been, talking with, John Studaris, the original builder of this building, and Mr. Bikini?
Mr. Biskine was the worker.
Biskine was a worker here.
There, and he had written to me, to Ken, yes, saying you shouldn't be out there doing this or doing that. You know,
He picked you up at the train station.
you know, that was pretty amazing. I tell you, I had my suitcase, and I was trying to avoid the crowd on K Street, and I thought to myself, now how am I gonna get back to the farm from here? Because I've always driven that, you know. And so I remembered Mr. Mesquine and his letters. And so I called him, and he said, I'll come and pick you up right now, in his little old coupe. And you know, I got in that door, he moved the door and sat down, and I was tearful. It felt so safe. And I just turned my head towards the window and shed a few tears of gratitude.
Right.
And so he drove me, and that's another thing, was seeing the farm.
Well, that's the thing, when you got back here, you went to the farm and there were people in your house. And you didn't know what to do. I mean, you were, so 3 years, you were 22 at the time. Sort of acting as head of the household at that point, trying to gain back your farmland. Now you had no place to go. So, I mean, this was a trying time. So it's one thing to be incarcerated in these camps, but then when they let people out, people lost their homes. Some of them were burnt down. You drove past Mayhew Church, it was completely burned down. It was full of artifacts and people's belongings
And pianos, there were 5 pianos, I think,
that people were hoping to get back once they got back to their land. But to come back and find your land isn't yours.
And everything was gone. Everything you
Studebaker,
was
gone.
Well, my Studebaker's gone. Yes, the all the farm equipment was gone. Every tool in the shed, in the barn, was gone. Nothing left. Nothing. Even the butane tanks were gone. And here were these people living there. And so I had to tell them that we were coming back and we would like for you to find another place. That was so, when I opened the screen door, I tell you, the children came to the door and said, "Mommy, somebody's here." I tell you, my heart sank. But anyway, what is interesting, it took a long time before they could find another place to live. There were mother and children, and finally, they did leave. My father had an old Chevrolet with his original tools that he had hidden, with him. So he would go to the farm every single day and take care of the trees. He would prune whatever had to be pruned, and so finally, then they had left. What is interesting about this story is that in the meantime, my brothers, we have 4 teaching credentials from my family, and my brothers were teaching 2 of them teaching in Rancho Cordova, and one of his students said, "Oh, I know that place. We live there." And he was so happy about that. And I thought to myself, how great. If we had evicted them, we would have created another angry children or angry people. But this boy was happy being there. And it was so good to hear that.
wow, that is not in the book.
Oh,
That is an amazing tidbit of, so you have been a fighter all your life. You have fought for, going to school. You walked your siblings down to the grocery store to read to them. You went to college, even going to Michigan by yourself and getting your nursing degree and dealing with, I'm sure that it couldn't have been easy in the Air Force, even as a nurse, you probably got some blowback there of being Japanese descent. But then to come home and have to face trying to get your house back when your rest of your family is still in Colorado, you had to, in a single day or within a week, find a place for them to live in Sacramento. You had to find the money for that so that when your family got here, they would have a place to stay, a place to sleep, so that they could start looking for work, so that they could start to try to get the land back and get your home back, your farm. Many of you probably don't know, but this farm started out as a strawberry farm, but they eventually grew raspberries. Raspberries that were served to the King and Queen of England
As they passed through Canada.
as they were on a Canadian tour in the 40s, 30s or late 30s, early 40s. And so, yeah, prize-winning from right here. Prize-winning raspberries served to the King and Queen. That's impressive.
Do you know about the walnuts?
Yeah, okay, we gotta talk about, so, I'm sure at some point, so you have Miss Cox that taught you how to be to be a writer, to get your voice out, to speak your story. We have the gentleman who got you on the train to talk about what you were going through, and you then did several public speaking after that when you were in college. But then, with no degree in law, when the subdivisions were coming in and encroaching upon your farm, they were listed for the county as a vacant lot. Only it wasn't vacant, it was a very active farm. And when they got back, all the children and their spouses worked on this farm to help keep the farm going all these years. People said, well, it's only occupied by a poor dirt farmer. So, Kiyo went down in front of the Board of Supervisors. She had to file all this paperwork with her brother Steve and her other brothers and sisters who were all very well educated to fill out these very complicated forms and argue their case. So she took some walnuts from their tree with her on the day that she was to stand in front of the council. They were huge. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with California history and whatnot. You've heard of maybe the Twinkie defense in San Francisco, right? And that's how when Moscone got shot, that's the, okay, this is the walnut defense. How did you get the farm to remain with those walnuts? Tell us that story. It is amazing.
Well, it was pretty scary too. Scary. You know, I had no background in law. None. I was just a nurse. And to be faced with this dilemma, my father, the environmental impact report said my father's 20 acres was marginal and poor soil, and only a dirt farmer lived there. In the transmittal, which my brother and I went and we got, it said this property was represented by the daughter of the dirt farmer. I had said I am representing my father, John Shinji Sato. My name is Kiyo Sato. I said all that. And yet, that's how they wrote me down. So anyway, I got the environmental impact report and printed a copy for each one of my siblings. We met at the farm in that little kitchen, and we went through the whole thing. It took practically a whole day. So I said, now, we had input from Steve, who was with the Corps of Engineers. We had input from my brother George, who was what do you call it? Plant science, whatever. Anyway, and the educators, the teachers, my brothers, who were in education, and so we had great input. Finally, it's finished. I said, "Well, Steve, you're the engineer, and you know what you're talking about. I think you need to go to these meetings. You know, the planning commission. We had the subdivision review board, and then into finally the board of supervisors." See, and Steve said to me, "Oh no," he said, "you do it. You're a better talker." And I didn't sleep there for a while. The people who were cutting up my father's land took me out of the meeting that was planning commission meeting into the hallway, and here I was surrounded with these big, tall men. The owner probably, there was a lawyer, I'm sure, and a few others, developer, and they said, "If you don't go along with us, we're gonna sue you." I said, "Well, this is a democracy. You have a right to say your piece. I have a right to say my piece. And I'll let the board decide whichever way." And I walked back to the chambers. Oh, I tell you, it was a worrisome time. And I didn't get served with legal papers in the middle, 9 o'clock at night. So did my father, imagine. But we got through it, thank goodness.
Because of those walnuts.
Exactly. By the way, did you know that the White House ordered 50 pounds of our walnuts?
No. Where is that tidbit at?
And I understand they sprayed them gold and hung them on the Christmas tree at the White House.
Wow. I hope this is in the next book. So you did, your fight continued, your speaking engagements continued. You tried to get your mom, unfortunately, being just a steady soldier of a worker and mother and caretaker and nurturer, ended up getting cancer. And the last chapter of the book, spoiler alert, but she passed away. But you tried to get a street named after her.
Yes.
You will just about take on anybody, won't you?
But I will always be for children. Kodomo no tameni. Always. Mm-hmm.
Because she was.
We have to start there. All of them. Children are taught to beware of strangers. That's you and me. We've got to change that. Did you know that We have Mother's Day, Father's Day, Elephant's Day, Donut Day, everything. We don't have Kids Day.
We do in Rancho.
Not, you know, we don't celebrate it like.
No, well, you're right.
And this is what the middle school student said. How come we don't have Kids Day? No? They wake you up, students wake you up to a whole lot of things. But we need to start there. And I'm working on a child's Bill of Rights.
Still fighting. 99 still fighting. Now, you have 4 children.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Chia is here today.
Mm-hmm.
Then Paul is the next eldest. John,
Mm-hmm.
then Paul, and then Tanya.
Mm-hmm.
They're all adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose to adopt?
It just comes naturally when you're the oldest of 9 children. Well, my brother told a reporter, "Oh, she's my second mother."
Well, you were a mother to them because
Yes,
the age
exactly,
difference is,
exactly.
I mean, I'm 14 years younger than my sister, and it is quite like having 2 mothers, which from a certain time period is a little annoying, but then after that it becomes very wonderful.
You put that well. Yes, yes. And I must say, my daughter is tall and beautiful
Yes, she is.
and intelligent because she doesn't have any of my genes.
Oh, no.
I have seen pictures of you. You were very, very beautiful. So I want to just read something to you. If you have not, those of you who have not read Kiyo's book, I mean, this is probably one of the best. Again, I'm not a reader, so this book should be part of curriculum in schools because it teaches so many lessons. It's not about history, it's not about the story of one family. It is so much more than that. By the way, if none of you have read it but would like to purchase it, as soon as we're done here, you can buy a copy and you can actually get Kiyo to sign it. If you have brought your copy of her book, or the first edition, Dandelion Through the Crack, she will sign that as well. But this is kind of how I summed up the book for me. This book for me was a love letter to your parents about family with such love and respect for one another and hope for the future. While tragic events happened throughout the journey for the family, there was such amazing foundation built by your parents out of love. Love for each other, love for their children, love for the farm and the life they built together. Their hard work and Shinji and Tomami's constant teachings created 9 very strong, capable, and resilient children who have helped shape people for generations to come. Thank you, Kiyo, for the courage to tell your story and to write this book. They say you don't want to meet your heroes, but I am so glad I've met mine. That's you. You made me cry.
Me too.
Okay, so does anybody have a question that they would like to ask Kiyo? Yes, if you could stand up.
Where is the farm located off of Routier Road? Is it like closer to Old Placerville Road between Folsom Boulevard, or is it closer to the river?
No, it's, Routier Road. in the middle of center of Routier Road is Ellenwood Avenue going towards the railroad tracks in the back, going to Mather Kiyo. And it's at the end of that Ellenwood Avenue that our farm used to be. The developer said, you have such beautiful trees, we'll save as many as we can. You know, beautiful, beautiful trees. My brother and I counted how many plants and trees and flowers that my parents planted. We counted 98. Imagine, persimmons and pomegranates and all kinds of trees. But they cut everything down. It was like the surface of this table, the 20 acres. So now it's growing houses and lawns.
Another question? Yes.
Kiyo, I'm very curious, were you required to sign the loyalty questionnaire in order to go on to school?
I didn't hear
Were,
that.
were you required to sign the loyalty questionnaire within the camp in order to get out?
No, I was already gone before that. Yeah.
My sister had to sign it to go to nursing school in Pennsylvania.
There's a question back here, yes.
Hi, Kiyo. It's Tansuno. I've heard you speak, I don't know how many times.
Uh-oh.
I'm a major, major fan, but what I'd like to ask you is the eye chart.
Oh,
Would you please share your eye chart?
oh, thank you for asking that. Yes, I'm in trouble. What had happened is that I was assigned to test the visual acuity of 3 and 4-year-old children. How do you know how well these little eyes are seeing? And I tried everything on the market. You know, the alphabet chart, the picture chart, the shape chart, all that. And none of them gave me the results that I wanted. And so one day as I was trying to teach the children the positions of the letter E and cut out a giant E, and then all of a sudden I thought to myself, I'll put a head on that E. And a 4-year-old said, oh, that's a bird. And that's when I got so excited, and modified the letter E into a bird and wrote a story of this bird that didn't want to be a plain old black bird and gets into trouble, and the kids love that story. That was the instruction period. And then also devised, one problem is, kids are not able to cover one eye adequately, so I had these disposable cardboard eyeglasses with flip-out lenses designed, and they worked so well. The State Department sent a couple of for their nurses, and they suggested that I copyright it and make it available for everybody else. Well, I'm a nurse. I'm not a business person. I wonder if there's any business persons in this crowd. But the marketing part is the one that's been difficult for me. But this method also won an award from the RN Foundation for Excellence in Nursing, and that was a national award. And what else, Chia? But anyway, it's been recognized, And then included in the state guidelines for vision screening 3 or 4-year-olds. The doctors would not believe. In fact, they didn't believe, or they ignored. I think they thought that I wasn't for real, maybe. But anyway, I'd send a referral into the doctors, and doctor would send it back normal. I send it again, normal. So finally, I worked with a parent and had her watch and do with me what is, because it's so easy to do. You know, all you have to do is tell you which way the bird is flying. And so finally, I did that. And next time I went to that school, that child had an occluded patch for the good eye, to strengthen the bad eye. You have to, for amblyopia, you have to do this in preschool. Most doctors say when they get into grade school, then it's too late. So this is why my target is finding and treating amblyopia. That's called cross-eye. Now, this also was accepted by the State Department. Now I review the State Department guidelines, and I find that they call my method the flying crow. And it's not recommended. And the only 2 things recommended by the state guidelines is the layer symbols with a house and apple and whatever, and chart. And the other one is HOTV, which has been around. And those 2 have eliminated all the others. So, anybody has,
That's how the system works.
yeah, it's too bad. It's really too bad. But, my father, who was a farmer, he said, one of these days your method is going to go international. It's going to, and it should. I mean, all the children are not being identified. We need to do that.
Somebody else over here had a question, yes?
Hi, Kiyo.
Hi.
You're such a treasure. Thank you for speaking today. My question is about the 1981 hearings that were being held by the Federal Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians. And so in 1981, I saw your name on a list of witnesses that were speaking to the commissioners. So I wondered what it was that you decided was important for them to hear, and why you thought that was important.
I should have you elaborate on that. Yes. 4 of us went to San Francisco to the national hearing and testified. They gave us only 5 minutes. And so we were able to say what we did. And I thought to myself, I'd like to hear what everybody will be saying. I'd like to go to the 3 days worth. Well, after the first few hours, I was wrung out listening to everybody. For the first time, these people are testifying, telling me exactly what they had to go through in 5 minutes. And so I said, no, I've had enough. I've heard enough. And all these people should have written their own story, but I heard them. And and remember that after it was all over, one there was unanimous agreement except for, no, because one, who was that?
Daniel Lundgren.
Lundgren, yes, exactly, thank you. You got more to say? No? Thank you.
Follow up on that.
Yes,
So, we are in a national discussion on redress and reparations for African Americans. And I'm wondering if you could share with the audience, what the meaning and how you felt about redress for Japanese Americans when you received it.
there was a lot of controversy at that time, as you will remember. Some of us just didn't want to go through with it, you know, and they said this was impossible. Many of them said this couldn't happen, and look what happened. So we got. I have a letter of apology from the president, 1990. With a reparations check for $20,000, and I said to myself, I would rather have been a free citizen for 4 years than to have to go through all this, than to receive $20,000. You know,
Because it's more than, it caused more damage than just 4 years of being imprisoned.
oh, absolutely.
It set back all Japanese Americans and anybody of Asian descent for centuries, for decades after.
Mhm.
I mean, the damage is way beyond the concentration camp.
Mhm. And the thing is, see, the people who really suffered were our parents, the Issei, and they were gone.
Right.
My parents were both gone by that time.
Do you think the apology meant a great deal to our community?
Did
Yes,
the,
yes,
The apology?
yes. I treasure that letter, but the thing doesn't, the letter doesn't say, that is not addressed to me. It's addressed to nobody. Anybody. You can have that letter. You can have that letter. But at least it's a good beginning.
and I believe, were there not 3 presidents that signed reparations? Just 2? Reagan and Bush and Clinton. And it was Clinton who actually wrote, "I'm sorry," and he got so much flack, whereas the other one was very vague, didn't say we're sorry, but saying I'm sorry means that we did something wrong. And how sad that is, that that's how we think. Today in 2023 even, we just need to change that. We need to be more like the Sato family, who cherished and respected and worked hard and helped people,
And take care of our kids.
and take care of your kids.
Right.
My cats are very well taken care of. Does anybody else have a question? We have another, yes.
Why was the title of the book changed?
Why was the title of the book changed from Dandelion in the Crack to Kiyo's story?
I like Dandelion Through the Crack. It's based on my father's haiku. You know, dandelion. You've been stepped on for so many days. Today you bloom.
But why did you
Dandelion
change it?
Through the Crack. Now, Willow Valley Press sold it to Soho, the New York publisher, and they changed it to Kiyo's story.
Okay.
Sorry
So,
about that.
that was a business decision on the part of the publisher, not Kiyo's.
Can I take a vote? How many like the dandelion? Oh.
It's meaningful, especially when you get to the back of the book and you see why you called it that. The book is so beautifully written. Ms. Cox sent you on a journey that you were clearly meant to take. And we can't wait to read the next. So you better get home and start editing.
We have